Students, teachers, parents, and game developers, welcome to the Game Design Challenge. Today is our second featured discussion by a professional game developer. We are going to be welcoming Stuart Jeff, the creative director of Legends of Learning. Stuart has been developing video games professionally for over 20 years and has shipped more than a dozen titles, including Drop Zone, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and Rise of Nations. He has acted as a creative director, design director, lead designer, systems designer, producer, game side programmer, UI programmer, multiplayer programmer, and, well, just a lot of things. His expertise and experience will shine through in his talk today. Execution is everything. Stuart will help us deep dive into the production process of video games, from identifying the critical aspects of your game to planning a timeline that allows for incorporation of feedback and polish. Stuart will talk us through the process of video game development and explain how to execute on your vision. This will undoubtedly be an insightful talk, and that will help you better succeed as a video game developer. Stuart will be answering questions at the end, so feel free to put them in the chat as we listen. Stuart, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stuart Jeff, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about production. Here you've got a prototype, and I'm going to help you figure out how to take that prototype and turn it into an actual product. So let me start the presentation now. All right. All right, so the title of this talk is Execution is Everything, because I believe that is actually true. This is going to be a critical phase for your projects. You're going to be taking your big idea and try to turn it into something that you can actually share with people. But first of all, who am I? My name is Stuart Jeff. I'm the creative director for Legends of Learning. I've been with Legends of Learning for almost 2 years now. But my background is from the traditional gaming industry. I've been making games professionally for about 20 years now, and I've played a lot of roles on a bunch of different teams during that time. I've worked on teeny tiny games all by myself that I was trying to finish in a couple of months. And I've also been part of massive teams. I think the biggest one was like 140 people, and we were working on a big project for 5 years. So I've done a little bit of everything and seen a bunch of different ways that different teams try to tackle the production process. So I'm going to try to pass on to all of you some of the things I've picked up along the way. So first of all, what is production? It's really about the process of turning the playable prototype that you've already got, hopefully, into an actual product. This is a really important distinction between prototype and product that it's worth talking about. A prototype, the point of a prototype is really there to help you prove out the value of your game design. They're for you, the game creator, and they're really there to try to answer your questions about specifically, like, is this a worthwhile thing for me to spend my time on? Products, on the other hand, are really about communicating the full value of an idea to everybody who tries it. They exist to provide value to players. So it goes from being something that's for you to something that's for everyone. First of all, though, we need to make sure that you're actually ready to start production. You got to make sure that you've got a playable prototype, right? That's really important. You need something playable, not just an idea. You want something that is on the screen. You've got a good idea that it's fun. You really have a clear idea of where you're trying to take all this. And if you don't feel confident about what you're trying to make for the world, then you're actually still in the pre-production phase. And you need to focus on trying to answer some of those fundamental questions for yourself about whether or not you're happy with the design, if this is fun, if this is something that's going to be worth your time to bring to a larger audience. So get those questions answered first. Hopefully, all of you have already finished that phase, and it's time to dive in and really start the production process properly. First of all, you need to understand your core loop. And so, what do I mean by core loop? The core loop is what the player is actually doing in the game. This isn't, the story. It's not a story you're trying to tell them. It's what are they doing? If it's a platformer, they're running and they're seeing an obstacle and they're jumping over the obstacle, and then they're going to repeat that process over and over again. That's a loop. Maybe in a cooking game, for example, they would get an order from a customer, and then they would cook the order, then they would deliver the order, and then they would get money for delivering the order, and then they'd get another order and start the process over again. Those are kind of basic loops, and you can build on those loops to increase the fun of the game. So in a platformer, for example, maybe you would add a new type of obstacle, or maybe new ways to jump. And by adding to that, the complexity of that loop, you're giving the player more fun, and you're kind of stretching out that loop. So the player will want to spend more and more time playing your game. And you also need to kind of understand, what's your goal here? Is this something you want players to play for 5 minutes? Is it something you want them to play for an hour? Or is it something really deep that they're involved with for thousands of hours potentially? The goal, though, is to identify what are the critical elements that make your game possible. Second of all, why is this game fun? Why did you think this prototype was a good idea? Try to be really specific here. What exactly is giving you a good time when you play? But it's really important to keep in mind that we all kind of love playing our own creations. It's just fun to play something that you've made. And you need to try really hard to separate yourself as a creator from yourself as a player. So, try to pretend you've never seen this thing before. Put on your blinders and erase your memory, and now just put the controller or the keyboard or whatever in your hand, start playing, and see what is actually fun about the game. And, feel free to enlist your friends or family or, anybody around that's willing to help out. Get them in there and, see what they think. See what they think is the most fun about that prototype. But the important thing is that you want to identify the essence of what's fun about your idea and be specific as possible, because it's going to really help you as we get into production. Now, this is the last sort of question you need to ask yourself, and it's a little bit advanced. When you're first starting out, this isn't really a critical thing to ask yourself, but I'm trying to approach this whole talk as a talk that I would tell anyone that's interested in making games. So even if you're just starting out, or you've been making games for 20 or 30 years, hopefully this talk will have value for you, because I think everyone can use the lessons of good production to help them realize their ideas. So it's really important, particularly in the professional world, to understand, who is this game for? What's your target audience? What does that type of person enjoy? What's their motivation for playing? How much time do they have to play? Are they a type of person who is going to have a tremendous amount of time to spend in one sitting? Or are they somebody that's only going to have 5 or 10 minutes here or there? It's really important to imagine who is most likely to enjoy this game. And it's totally cool if the answer is people like me. This is a game for me and my friends. There is nothing wrong with that. But it's important to think about, who is the audience here. And the reason for that is because you need to develop what I call a player-first mindset. Games, the only reason they exist is to be played. And the process of playing the game is really where the magic happens. And everything that matters is not actually on the screen. Everything that matters is how the player is processing the information on the screen. So it's all in their head. It's what's happening in that person's brain that we care about as game creators. And you are there as the game developer to really try to be that player's champion, try to represent them in the creative process, and think about what that player would want or what that player needs, and how you can best serve that player with your game. So another thing I think it's really important at the start of the production process is to essentially like set the goalpost for yourself. Define success. Think about ahead of time, what is my version of success when I'm done with this project? Is it just to have something that's playable? Is it, something that you can sit down with your family and play for an hour together on, a family game night? Or is this something that you want 10,000 people to download? Or, are you trying to make the next big Minecraft? Like really think about what success means. And on the flip side, think about what a failure would look like. Like, is it that the game doesn't work, or that nobody can understand how to play? They get confused. They stop playing too early. Is it a certain number of plays that you're looking for? And then think about that middle point. Like, what would it take for this to not be a waste of time? And I think that a lot of times some people set out with these big aspirations of, I want to be the next big, first person shooter that everybody's playing. But really, you'd be happy if you just got a couple of people smiling and, got them to play your game for an hour and they thought it was cool. Take all that into account when you're trying to figure out what your goal is. It's important to know what you want, or it's very hard to achieve what you set out to achieve. And also think about not just from the creator's perspective, but think about it from the player's perspective too. Like, what would make this game awesome versus when would I try to get a refund on Steam if I played this game? When would I get angry and walk away from the table if it's a board game? Think through those answers, not only from your perspective, but also from the player's perspective. Now, this is another sort of pro trick, is to think in terms of pillars. This is a tool that's just for you, but it's a really powerful tool because it's going to give you a method to decide what is and isn't important. And that's going to be critical as we go forward. So just roll with me here. We'll come back to these a lot, but first let's talk about like what pillars are and how you would define them. It's essentially a very small number of things, maybe 3 to 5, that define the essence of your game. What are the things that really, really matter about this game? And there's no right way to do this. In fact, there's a lot of different ways. I'll talk through a couple of them. For example, some people may make their pillars be about specific features that they want to deliver in the game. Like, let's say that we're trying to make a fighting game, something like Street Fighter or something like that. So, our pillars are, it's going to be a 1v1 fighting game where 2 opponents face off and they're going to try to take out the other character's energy before the time goes out. And there's going to be this huge cast of characters, and every single character fights a little differently. And then I also want to make sure that that elaborate button combos are going to be super powerful in this game. So like those are my pillars. That's one way to tackle it. A way that I like to tackle it is actually to think more in terms of emotions that you want the player to feel while they're playing the game. This is a little bit advanced perhaps, and it can get a little messy, but I really like to think about how I'm trying to make the player feel while they're playing. So for example, curiosity might be a pillar. So I'm going to try to reward the player every time they explore or go out of their way to try to experiment. And I'm going to give them some sort of concrete reward for doing that because I want them to feel that curiosity. Or maybe it's about, mastering a skill. Like this is a game that is really difficult to play, something like League of Legends, where they need to learn a lot and practice a lot and get actually good at something in order to do well in the game. Another type of emotion might be, to really focus on the player feeling the depth of the game, where, players might be able to customize their character with a really deep talent tree or something, where each talent would change how the character behaves. And, there's real benefit to understanding how each one of those talents not only works by itself, but works together to create a more powerful character. So that's another way that you can kind of tackle it. But the way I would suggest that when you're first starting out is to really think of it in terms of rules. Like, these are the rules for you as a creator on your game. So here's an example might be that you want the player to always feel comfortable and not pressured. Maybe it's a type of a game like Animal Crossing or something like that, where you don't want them to feel like they're under attack. You want them to relax and decorate their house and enjoy it. So the rule is the player should always feel comfortable. I'm not going to do anything to make them uncomfortable. Maybe another rule in a game like that would be the player will always be at their best when they're surrounded by friends, because you really want them to encourage them to bring their friends into the game, and now they can all play together. Another good type of rule is there are no zero-sum games. Now, if you're not aware, a zero-sum game means that one side wins and the other side loses. And you can't have a situation where both sides win or both sides lose. So if you make a game that's about avoiding zero-sum games, then it's really about cooperation. So you're saying, no matter what I do, I want it to, if I do something to help someone else, it also helps me. So those are types of rules. But let's get something concrete for a type of a game that some of you might be working on. Like, let's talk about a platformer, for example. So I'm going to set up 3 rules for this platformer example, and we're going to come back to this kind of late as we go. But for our platformer, we're going to say that the rule is a well-timed jump is always the solution. So this is a game about jumping. Another rule is that the player never hurts anyone. Like, maybe there's bad guys in the world, but the player never hurts anybody. And then the last one is the player is never going to lose more than 10 seconds of progress. So if they miss the jump and they fail, we're not going to make them redo a whole level. We're only going to make them go, like, say, 10 seconds back. Those are great rules for a platformer. And it really, you can kind of imagine how much that would change the way this particular platformer is going to feel. So that's your goal here with these pillars, right? Is you want to really define with as few words as possible, what is this game about? What is different about it? What is my secret sauce, as it were? Okay, so now we're going to talk more about about actual task. We're getting into the real production process here. So you've got a game that's a prototype. You want to turn it into a product. You want to turn it into a full experience that the player can play through. Maybe right now you've got just one level of your platformer, and right now you can run by pressing a button. And if you see an obstacle, you can press another button and you can jump over it. And if you hit the obstacle, then you die. But you have to start over. But you've only got that one level. Well, that's cool. That's a great start. It's a great prototype, but it's not really a product, right? It's not. It's kind of a demo. It's a short version of a game. To really try to turn that into the game, maybe we want to have, say, 10 levels where each level is a little bit different. Maybe every other level, we're going to introduce some new way to jump, for example, where before you could do a short jump, and then on the 3rd level, you can do a running jump, and then the 4th level, you can do a wall jump, and that sort of thing, where, like, we want to take the player on this journey of jumping over these obstacles. We want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them trying new things. And we want the whole thing to, maybe take, say, 4 hours to get through, all said and done on average. So, that's really different from that little demo prototype we've got. So we need to start thinking about what are the things we need to get there. Well, some obvious things. We're going to need 10 levels. Maybe each one of those levels could have a different art style. So, the first one is the caves level, and the second one is the grassy meadow level, and the third one is the underwater level. Whatever it is, we need to start thinking through all these different things that we want to have in our game, and features we'd like to have. So we're going to have 5 different types of jumps and 10 levels, and there's 15 different enemies that we're going to have. We need to start listing out all those little things that we're going to want in there. And my suggestion here is to actually get yourself a set of note cards, like just actual physical note cards, and get your Sharpie and start writing some of these big features on these note cards. So each note card has one feature that you want to have. And so, you want to get fairly specific, and in terms of things that you will actually see on the screen, or code that you're going to need to write to make it work. And now you want to go through those cards that you've made and start thinking about those pillars. On all those cool features you just thought up, how does each one of those features support the pillars that you just listed out? If it doesn't support the pillars, well, then there's kind of a problem, right? Like, either your pillars, didn't include enough, they didn't cover the core game, and you need to revisit them, or maybe, and this is what I hope your answer is, maybe you don't actually need that feature to make your game. The goal here is to try to start getting a sense for priority. What's actually important to pulling this thing off? Like, what do I really need to make? And so you're going to go through and think through how each one of these features is going to serve your bigger game. You're going to use the pillars to help do that. And a thing I want to point out here is that you really want to be thinking about this from the player's perspective. Turn off your creator hat for a second. Think about what the player would actually need to get the best experience here. All right, next up is about risk. Now, risk is a very important concept when it comes to production. Every single one of these features that you just listed out, they're going to have a certain level of risk. And what I mean by risk is that something with high risk is something that you do not know how to do or how you're going to do today. And something with low risk is something that you know exactly how to do, and you have the ability to do it right this minute. That's low risk. And there's different types of risk, right? There's technical risk. So maybe it's a programming concept that that games can be written such that one character follows another character, but you don't have any idea how anybody makes that work. So that's a pretty risky thing, but it's not impossible. An impossible task right now would be, I want a computer-controlled character that responds intelligently to everything the player can say, and organically creates a whole new plot around whatever we've discussed. Like, that is really hard. That's an impossible level of risk. Don't add that to your game. It's way too hard. Where we're talking about acceptable levels of risk are things that can be done. You have some idea of how to do it, but you're not exactly sure how to do it. So that's kind of like a high level of risk, but something you can still keep on the table. Next is design risk. So you have a good idea for exactly how you want a design feature to work, a system to work, but you don't know if it's going to be any fun. And the reason you don't know if it's going to be fun is because you haven't made it yet. That's a risk, though, and it's important to keep track of that. The other type of risk is production risk. And I think about this as content pipeline, because games are made out of assets, right? Like, you need art, you need levels to be designed. you probably don't know exactly how long it's going to take to make each one of those things. So you really need to think through, okay, this is a a 3D character, and I made one 3D character for my prototype, but for the actual release, I need 12 of those characters. So you need to start thinking through how long it's going to take to make each one of those characters. Do you actually need 12 characters? That kind of thing is what's really the production risk. Like, can I actually make the things I'm trying to set out to make in the time I have? And you want to just kind of note on those cards the risk for each one of those things, and keep that in mind as you're starting to figure out your schedule, because you want to tackle the risky things first. The goal with production is to make it so that as you get closer and closer to the deadline, there's less and less risk in the project. So start the risky things first, because if it doesn't work out, you can get rid of those things or replace them with things that are less risky, and keep reducing risk as you go. Okay, so now we're actually to the point where we're ready to make our schedule. And the schedule is the backbone of production. It's really important. It's also really hard to do. So to make a schedule, first of all, is I would look at the total amount of time that you really have. Like, if you're doing a competition, when is the absolute deadline? Or, if you're making a commercial game, when has your publisher told you that it has to ship? Different situations have different deadlines. But whatever the absolute deadline is, pretend 20% of that doesn't exist. So just focus on the 80% of the time that you actually have, and try to fit everything into that 80%. And then imagine that 20% doesn't exist. Like, don't even put it in your calendar. Make the due date 80%. And we'll come back to why I think that's useful, but let's just lop some schedule right off the top. So we're looking at 80% of our time. Now, with that remaining time, we want to break the schedule into something called milestones. Milestones are little check-in points on the project where you can say, I want to have exactly this done by this date. And don't worry exactly what you're going to do on each milestone yet. The important thing is to just divide the project into chunks. Now, different teams use different length milestones. Some teams do a really crazy process where, like, every day they have deliverables they're trying to hit, and they just make the game a little bit better every single day. A lot of times with really big teams that are making, the big $60 commercial games, it may be a whole quarter, so like 90 days to do a milestone. But generally, milestones, you can do these check-in points. When you're starting out, you want to measure milestones in days, because it's a really important thing to get into a rhythm of just checking to make sure that you're on track as often as possible. Let's just say a week. Let's break it into weeks that you've got left on the project. You can do shorter if you want, and do it every few days, but I wouldn't go further than a week. And then for each one of those weeks, start thinking about the theme of the milestone. So maybe, and when I say theme, I mean, what's the big push that you're focusing on with your game right now? So maybe this milestone's theme is, a new level that's playable, or maybe it's a new enemy type, or maybe it's, I'm going to get the inventory system is going to work well, or maybe it's, I'm getting rewards for winning a combat or something like that. You want that implemented and awarded to the player. Whatever it is, just think about it in terms of, like, what's a big, cool player-facing thing that I can assign to each one of these milestones. And again, let's get our note cards out. For this, I really do like actual physical note cards. You can use programs like Trello to replicate this, but it just doesn't feel the same to me. I like actually moving cards around on a table, but I'm also old, so maybe that's just me. But clear off the dining room table, or the conference room table, or whatever you've got, and make a note card for each one of the milestones that you've got until the project, and put them all in a nice row at the top of the table. And then make a new card for each one of the themes you're thinking about, and put that theme under each one of those milestones. So we've got a row of cards that identify the milestone date, and then we've got a row of themes under each one of those dates. And that's our starting point. So now we're going to match our features to our milestones. So remember, we had all those cards from before. We wrote out the features we had. We started thinking about how important they were for the game. We thought about how we could simplify them. We thought about how risky they were. Well, now what you want to do is take each one of those and try to put it under one of those milestones. Now, it's really tempting to try to figure out how you can put every single card under one of those milestones, but I can almost guarantee you, this is a spoiler, you're not going to have enough time to do all those cards in that time period. Like, you're just not. You never do. You always want to do more than you can actually pull off. So you're going to have to make some cuts here. But let's stick to our theming on these milestones, and let's try to get each one of these features that we've got that can support those themes divided up under those milestones, so that you can say, okay, this week I'm going to have a new enemy, I'm going to have a new level that's in there, and the player is going to have a wall jump added. Those are the things we're accomplishing this week. Maybe we've got 3 people on the team, and each one of the people are going to take one of those things to focus on. We're all going to get together at the end of the week, and we're going to make sure that happened. But we need to figure out, what we're going to try to do each week. So there's a trick you can do for this, though, when you're trying to think about how much time it's going to take. And even people who have been in the industry for a really long time do that. And that's this producer's trick, where however long you think something is going to take, you need to at least double that time. And that's what you're going to track to. And really, when you're starting out, you may need to triple or quadruple that time. Because honestly, the biggest difference between people just starting out and seasoned professionals is that pros are better at predicting how long things are going to take. And honestly, we're still not very good at it. So, you're going to be bad at predicting, and that's okay. You're learning. The important thing is to just keep that in mind as you're trying to decide what you can try to do. Okay, so now we've got the whole table laid out with no cards. We've got columns that show us each one of the milestones we're trying to do. We've got each of our feature cards under those milestones. Now we need to kind of step back and look at the big picture. Think about what we can actually accomplish in those weeks. Rearrange, shift cards around. And, honestly, this is when we want to start cutting. We want to start getting rid of tasks, because we're not going to be able to do every single thing we want. But each one of these cuts is probably going to be hard to some extent, because this is your baby and you're excited about having these features in there, and you want them there. You don't want to cut it. You want to push and get more done. But trust me, just cut it. Is this thing critical to this game working? No? All right, it's out. We'll put it in a special stack that we call stretch goals. And if we have time at the end, we'll do it. But spoilers, you will not have time at the end. But it's okay. Whatever you need to do to get through that process, just try to reduce the amount of work you're actually trying to tackle. Keep yourself focused, and everything will go much better. Start big and work towards small. So, if you are thinking about this really cool detail that you can put on your character, where every time you jump, there's going to be this amazing, sparkle effect that comes out, and there's going to be a rainbow trail, and it's going to trace back through all the places that you've been as you're running. That sounds really cool and all, but is that actually critical to your platformer, where you're just trying to jump over obstacles? I mean, it would change the experience and it'd be cooler, but it's a lot of work, and it maybe doesn't help you make a better game about jumping. So those are the kind of questions you need to ask yourself. Like, is this actually important for me getting this thing done? And just try to be honest with yourself. And it's hard. Okay, so now it's time to work. So you've got your milestones split up. You know your first milestone. You've got all the cards. Now let's assign them to whoever is going to be doing the work. Maybe you're working by yourself and you're going to try to tackle them all. Maybe you've got a team and you can divide it up. But this is the point where, especially for this first milestone, just get your head down and start working. Get as much of this stuff done. Try to get things, try to get your features as finished as possible. Don't fool yourself by saying, oh, well, I wrote the code. But if you haven't tested it to make sure it worked, it's not done. It has to be on the screen and playable for it to be done. You just need to focus on getting the work done. Don't try to rethink everything, constantly, especially in the beginning. Just focus on getting that work done and making it to that first milestone check-in point. Especially at the beginning, just barrel ahead and do your best, get it done. But this is game making is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So if you go out there working 24/7, you're going to burn out and you're going to run out of energy before you get to the end. We want nice, sustainable development that doesn't kill us in the process. We want to set reasonable goals for ourselves that we can actually accomplish so we can feel good about our progress. So just steady progress is the goal here. Just get as much as you can done without killing yourself. And now when you get to milestone, this is really important. It's like the moment of reckoning. So you have to be really honest about how much did you do that you said you were going to get done by this point. And chances are you will not have gotten everything done that you hoped to get done. And that's okay. That's part of the process. But that's something we want to work towards improving. You want to be accurate with milestones. If you can get your team to the point where you can predict exactly what they're going to be able to get done during a given period, then you can accomplish so much more just because you can properly predict how long it's going to take. And that's a really important skill to develop. And that is really, the difference, I think, between amateur and professionals is you get better and better at predicting. And like I said, even when you are really experienced, it's still really hard to predict. So you didn't accomplish your goal. Well, that means something's got to give. The answer is not, I'll work harder. No, that's not healthy and it's not good for you. What you need to do is figure out what's going to get cut, because chances are you don't get a later deadline. You still got the same deadline you already have, but you've got to figure out how to make the same amount of things fit into less time now. So we're going to go back to our board. Maybe at this point you did copy it over to Trello or one of those tools. You've got it digitally. Maybe you took a picture with your phone or something like that you can refer back to. But anyway, you're going to revisit your milestones, all your future milestones, and you're going to change around that feature list. You're going to reprioritize things. You may go ahead and cut features. It's okay to cut things. You can start out with great aspirations and realize it's just not feasible, and go ahead and decide to cut. Just when you're making those cuts, keep in mind that sort of player first perspective. Think about what that's going to do to the player experience. Think creative. Get creatively. Like, it doesn't have to be the solution you first imagined. Like, you can accomplish gameplay goals in a lot of different ways. So maybe you thought every single monster needed to be totally different, like totally different art. And you realize, I cannot actually get this many monsters made in the time I have. But you could make them a different color, for example. That's not quite as cool, but like the player will notice when they're a different color. Or hey, maybe you could make them a different color and a different size. And the size plus the color, that's enough to really differentiate between the two. The player will know that this is a different enemy, and that's really the goal, right? We just want the player to know that this character is different and they behave differently. So think about stuff like that. Like, how can we get creative to reduce our work so that we can actually get a whole game done. And really, always cut more than you think you need to. Especially those big features. Like if you realize that you could actually get away with not having an inventory on the player, for example, cut inventory. That's a whole lot of work. You got to have the backpack screen for looking at it. You got to, have items that are dropping that you're holding on to. What are you going to do? I mean, it's a ton of things that are all related to just that one feature. But if you got rid of it, a whole bunch of work goes away, and that should actually bring you joy. As long as you're still accomplishing the pillars you set out to hold up, it's all good. The important thing is to just be honest about what you can actually accomplish, and really think through what's important at every step of the way, so that next milestone your team is able to deliver exactly what they said they would. And spoilers, they probably won't, but you keep it getting better, and each milestone should be better than the last. And like I said, risk is a big part of these milestones. So each time it's going to be something that has to get factored in. You want the risk sort of addressed early in the process, because that's probably where you're going to need to make cuts or make changes. So try to tackle that stuff first, so you don't get caught surprised at the end without a full game. Also, this is more than just a to-do list. Don't just work through your checklist. It's easy to kind of get lost in the day-to-day work of tasks. Play your game every day. That's it. Play your game every day. First of all, that makes sure that your game is playable every day, which is actually really hard to accomplish. But that's a good goal for yourself, is to make sure that your game is playable and that you can try it each day, and that just make sure it's getting better each day in your eyes. And if it's not, ask yourself why. Ask yourself what you could be doing differently to better achieve your goals. Think about the player. Put on your player blinders, right? Like, forget everything you know about making the game. Try to look at it with fresh eyes and experience what that player might experience. So just focus on simplifying rather than adding complexity. If if the game doesn't quite feel fun, doesn't feel like it's quite working, 9 times out of 10, there's some way that you could take something out of the game and make it make sense, rather than try to add something else to it to make it make sense. You don't want to create more work for yourself. You want less work. That's the goal. And, just accept that, like, things change. You're learning as you're doing this process. Things that you were just sure they were going to work, sometimes they don't work. And things you had no idea if they were going to work might turn out to be awesome. But you've really got to keep your eyes and ears open and listen. I think of it as like listening to the game. Listen to what the game wants to be. Really think about it and try to adjust your priorities to take the cool stuff into account. Don't be afraid to cut features or really look after what's working. But huge caveat: don't go chasing waterfalls. Like, you will definitely have the coolest possible idea that was not part of your original plan while you're making your game. And at this phase, save that for the next game. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just keep focused on what you set out to do. Execution. Focus on getting it done. You file that cool idea away in some sort of special folder for your future game projects and make that game later. Right now, just focus on delivering what you set out to deliver and making it as awesome as possible. And I think you're probably seeing a theme at this point. Cut early and cut often. And I mean, really think about this. The best games, okay, there are a few games out there that their whole bread and butter is the fact that they are insanely complicated worlds that the player can exist in. Like, like the Grand Theft Autos of the world, or like, if you try to add up all the Roblox experience together, like that's a massive amount of content. That's not what we're trying to do here. Like that takes thousands of teams, countless years to put those kind of worlds together. You want to focus on doing a few things, but making it everything you do as good as possible. Don't do a bunch of things, just a few things, and focus on making each thing you do as perfect as possible. And a thing that I like to think about is I should have included a picture in the slideshow, but if you've ever seen the Buddhist sand painters, like they take all this colored sand and they make this beautiful painting. It's really tedious. It's a tremendous amount of effort, and then when it's all done, they just sweep it away. It's just done and it's gone. I think that's really how you have to be as a game developer. Don't fall in love with your work. Like you started making a cool feature, it's not quite working out, cut the feature and don't be sad about it. It's just move on. You know, you got to enjoy the process of making the game. Sometimes you'll build stuff that doesn't fit. Sometimes you'll build stuff that doesn't look good. And sometimes you'll build things that are amazing, but it doesn't actually serve your pillars, or it creates a bunch of extra work that you don't have time for, and you've got to be ready, willing, and able to cut that stuff. So practice detachment. You're focus on the bigger picture. Don't get caught up in not wasting any work. Okay, now we're going to talk about something that's really important to me. This is towards the end of playtesting, and honestly, if you really do honor that schedule where I said just focus on 80% of the development work, the last 20% really focus on playtesting. I mean, you're in a great spot if you have 20% of your time left and you've got a fully playable game that you think is ready to go out there. Now let's do some playtesting. So what is playtesting? First of all, you are not the player. Like you've been practicing imagining yourself as not the player, but I promise you, you're not actually that good at it. You can't forget all the things that you know as the creator of the game. You need people who don't actually know anything about your game to play it. And you want to watch those people play your game. And I say watch, and watch is the most important element here. You need to listen and look. Do not talk. Don't talk. Like just watch them and watch their reactions. Always watch the face. When somebody's playing your game for the first time, they can't help but make facial expressions, and they're usually like really honest emotions. Sometimes they might be really happy. Sometimes they might be really confused, or they're concentrating, or they're frustrated, or maybe they're even angry. But that's all important information for you to know, because it's how you start to wrap your head around whether or not the work that you've been doing is really getting through to your players. And so, oftentimes what their expressions show is more valuable than what they say. It's good to listen to their words, but really watch their body language and their reaction. And a lot of times you'll get a better sense for how they actually felt. So here's what I like to do. I like, when you bring somebody in to play, or you put the game in front of them, tell them, that you're going to be watching and that you would love for them to just say whatever's going on in their head as they're playing. And also, this is really important, let them know that you will not answer any of their questions until the end. I guarantee you what's going to happen is they're going to start playing, and then they're going to be like, well, what's this do? Don't say anything. Don't answer their question. Let them figure it out. You want to see them figure it out. How long did it take them to figure it out? Were they able to figure out? Were they frustrated because it took them so long to figure it out? Did they feel proud of themselves when they figured it out? These are all really good questions to ask yourself. That's how you grow as a designer and grow as a game maker. Now, let's talk about incorporating feedback, because like everybody's got an opinion about video games. We've all been playing games for a lot of our life. We have a lot of thoughts. We love to share them with the game developers. You are now a game developer, so you're getting all of these thoughts from people. First of all, it's really important to know that the player is always right when they describe their feelings. So if they say that they are frustrated, they were frustrated, if they didn't like something, they did not like it. It's easy to try to trick yourself into thinking, oh, well, that person just doesn't get it, or like they haven't played enough games like this. No, don't get confused about that stuff. The player is correct with their feelings, but, and this is really important, but they're almost never right with their solution. So people, they'll be playing and they'll be like, I don't like this power up. It really should make me go twice as fast. It should make me go twice as fast, and this only does 20% faster, and that doesn't feel any fun. So let's break that down. They wanted the power up to do more, but really, let's look at their emotions and like what they're feeling. They're feeling frustrated because they didn't feel like they got enough benefit for getting that power up. So maybe what you need to think about is, like, did they have to work too hard to get this particular power up? Because if they put in a bunch of work and then they just get a ho-hum result, well, that's not fun. Maybe the solution is not to make the power up more powerful, but make it more easier to get or more frequently something they pick up. Don't just take what they're suggesting at face value. Really try to unpack what they're saying and think about why they're saying it and how you could shift the design, with thinking about your pillars, thinking about your player perspective, think about how you could shift the design to solve the problem in a way that's right for the game. But know your limitations. It's easy to trick yourself. Sometimes people are right. So that's always something to keep in mind. You're not infallible as the game designer. So try to be honest with yourself. And then this is a note, is that like making games is really hard. It's like really, really hard. And there's almost certainly going to be a point in the project where you're going to feel like like it's not worth it or it's not working. At that time, just focus on your to-do list and try to make progress for the next day. Keep going. Every creator feels this at some point in the project, but it almost always gets better. When you get closer to the finish line, you'll start being excited about getting something out there, and it makes it all worthwhile. Also, like, make time for love in your schedule. I think you have a responsibility to your players. Your players are giving you their most valuable resource, their very own time. And that's a gift. It's like we all have a finite amount of time. And so I think that you owe it to your player to try with everything you have to give them something back for that, to give them some sort of value. Think about it. Like, games actually change how people think about things. So this is your opportunity to make a positive impact. So think about how you can do those things and kind of work that into your production process. All right, we're getting towards the end here. I call this execution is everything because the game you start with is not going to be the same when you get on the other side. Don't fall in love with your idea. Instead, really think about like how you can communicate this idea to players and understand that the game you end up may end up saying something different to players than you imagined when you started. But the thing that's always important to keep in mind is that if the player can't see it and feel it, it doesn't exist. All your great ideas are wonderful, and I encourage you to pursue them and try to figure out how to execute on them. But the goal here is to actually make something of value for the player. So really try to focus on that with your production process. And your love always comes through. It really does. People love people, not perfection. They want to fall in love with the things that they do. They want to feel like their time is valuable. There needs to be something there to love. So, my advice to you is to take a chance and take some risk and put yourself out there and just give it your all. And, I don't think you'll have any regrets in the end. So, may you all have no regrets. Now I will stop sharing and take some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a extremely engaging presentation, and I think you hit on a lot of really, really valuable information there. A
Thank you.
number of questions have come in, so I'll just go in order that they came in. And the first one is, how do you know your audience? How do you identify what a good audience for your game is?
So this is actually a really tricky question to answer. I think it gets into a lot of game industry business that I have trouble kind of like separating out of my head. But honestly, I like to start thinking about my audience before I start thinking about my game design. That's kind of a luxury that I've developed, over many years. I think about the audience, and then I think about what that audience would want and create a game design that kind of serves that need. But you guys probably have a lot of ideas already. So I really think that it's best to start out thinking about what you as a player would want. Yourself better than anybody else out there. So when you're really getting your feet wet as a designer, think about what you want and what you need. You be your own audience. And then as you grow as a designer, you'll be able to start imagining what other people are looking for as well.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that because one of the games that I'm working on right now, I designed for myself and then figured out, oh my goodness, I am a woman and I designed a game that women and girls like, but I didn't think about that when I was doing the initial design. I was just designing something that I liked.
Totally. And that's a great way to go. It really is. We need a lot of games like that.
So someone wanted to know, what is the biggest game design mistake that you've made in your career?
Oh man, where to begin? No, this is my personal trap that I do way too much. Is I think really cerebrally, and I think about like how I'm going to make the player feel, and I start to see patterns, and I get excited about this concept, where I'm this thought process the player is going to go into, but then when you present it, the player thinks it's going to be something else. Like, it's really important to match the player's expectations to what you're actually offering them. And that's actually quite hard. So you can use tools like genre to help. So like if you're making a strategy game, don't make it look like a fighting game or a racing game. Like, there are strategic elements to those things, but if somebody goes in expecting the car to go fast, don't make it all about optimizing gear shifting or something like that in order to be enjoyable. So I guess the biggest mistake is to like a mismatch between your vision and idea from what the audience is expecting when they see the game.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have a favorite game or a favorite game that you've made?
I have it. I mean, it's kind of like when you ask people what's your favorite movie, it has more to do with mood than anything else. I feel like
Right.
I play a tremendous number of games still all the time. I think it's really useful to play a lot of games. But some of my favorite of all time. I'll pick one that's more surprising that a lot of people may not have heard. Is I just absolutely love the game Spelunky. It's a tiny game made by like two people for the Xbox version. I just think it has such beautiful game design, and I never get tired of playing it. I've played probably thousands of hours of it, and I really enjoy it. But I enjoy all sorts of things. I was a big StarCraft player, really into that. I've made a lot of strategy games, so I love playing strategy games. But I also like stuff like Animal Crossing. I like puzzle games. I honestly like just about everything.
Well, I guess it helps you become a good designer, just being able to appreciate all aspects of games themselves.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Um, so someone wanted to know, when you're brainstorming and developing concepts, should they be trying to separate audio and visual design ideas from the game functions, even when they feel entwined?
That is a really good question. I think that it depends is the sad answer. I wish I gave you a really concrete answer, but I think some concepts are as much about the audiovisual experience as they are about like the rules, for example, or the content, the dialogue, whatever. So I think you really have to think through your game and what is actually important. And it's totally fine for your pillars to be like, maybe your pillar is gorgeous pixel art because you just love pixel art, and like that's totally cool. I tend to be more of a systemic thinker. I think more in terms of rules and game design, so that kind of colors a lot of my designs. But absolutely, you can make a game that is it's very driven by audio visuals, and those, if that's the case, those are your biggest risk. Like, you have to nail that. That's your core pillar, so really focus on those things first and foremost. Whereas, something like strategy games, a lot of times how you present that strategy game is more of a supporting feature rather than a dominant feature. So, like, you want to use a presentation that helps people understand what questions you're asking them as players to solve, but it's not quite as tightly coupled. So it really just depends on the type of project and the type of game.
So I'm glad that pillars came up again because I actually had a question with pillars. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you talked a lot about how to use pillars when planning milestones and evaluating different aspects of your game. But how do you communicate these pillars to your team and allow them to keep them in the forefront of their mind?
So that is also a really good question. There's the spectrum that I've seen, and I've tried various ways here. So one approach is to be really over the top explicit about it. Like, some people even print them out and hang them on the wall of the studio, and everybody sees them every single day. And it's like a machine. Like, what are the pillars? What are the pillars? What are the pillars? Let's always think about it. Like, and I think that with some teams that works really well. Another thing, though, that I've been kind of dabbling with is to really think of them really for myself, to guide my own design, and then working with a team, and then asking them what they think are the most important things. And the ideal is that what they say is matched very closely with what you were expecting. That means you're communicating effectively. It's always good, particularly with a team, to think about your communication, and that keeping in mind that a lot of times somebody not understanding or misinterpreting what you're saying is your fault as a creator. You're not communicating the idea sufficiently enough. And pillars can actually be a way that you can measure how well you've communicated.
That's great. That's wonderful insight. Is there any maximum time that you would recommend to a team for game development to avoid demotivation or just working on a game for 10 years?
So this is one that you know I do think that there's an optimal time, and for many years I tried to convince myself that I could very quickly make awesome games in just a couple of months, and I've proven to myself time and time again that that is almost impossible, and that I really do think game designs take a good while to really bake and form up and become really strong. And I think honestly that's probably somewhere between 18 to 24 months of constant work. That doesn't mean that you have to wait that long before you release it or before you play it, but I think it takes that long for an idea to really gel and become good. And the flip side of that is I do think ideas have a kind of an expiration date where they start to get moldy and trip up over their own sort of gross internals. And I think if you start looking at three or more years, you really got to ask what you're doing and why you're doing that. That all that said, I think a very different thing is a game that's operating as a service. Something like World of Warcraft is really old, but they've done an amazing job of continually reinventing that game while remaining true to what it's always been about. And I think that's an art form in its own right. And I think we're starting to see more and more games that are designed to be like that, sort of living things that continue on for decades.
As someone who is still playing World of Warcraft 14 years after I started, I can definitely understand that one. Um, so this is a very large question. There's a lot of questions in it. Could you explain your vision on the sentence, go deep but not wide, regarding game design? Does it mean that we should focus in new features that are well done and deep ones? And how should we measure the minimum features to provide in a game?
So I think this is where you kind of get into the art of design. Um, I do think that the phrase "less is more" is very meaningful. I tend to be, my sort of personal design aesthetic is that I want to communicate as much information as possible with as few mechanics as possible. So to me, like the design ideal is something like the game of Go. It's thousands of years old. It's a beautiful board. The rules are very simple. There's very few mechanics. All I can do is put colored stones down on the board, but I can literally play it my entire life and only scratch the surface of the possibility space in that game. And there's a lot of games that can kind of fit it. A lot of the old games fit in that. Things like chess, things like poker. They're really deep games that with very simple mechanics that can keep you engaged for a long time. And that to me is my own personal design ideal. But I think it's also key to keep in mind that there isn't one right answer. Like it is art, so you can have you can disagree emphatically, and go off and make your Baroque bespoke games that that have all these moving parts and complexity is your thing, and that's cool too. So I think it's really about trying to understand what's important to you as a creator, and then structuring your process to support that.
Absolutely. So I know we're actually over time here. Do you have any parting words of advice or like good wishes or
Yeah.
any words of inspiration that you'd like to share with our audience?
I guess really just like your voice matters a lot. Like you are new to this world of game design, but we want to hear from you. And it almost like chokes me up because like I really think it's important that we have more representation in games. So stick with it and be awesome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this great talk and words of inspiration. As someone who's been in the game industry for quite a while, actually found some wonderful nuggets of advice in there. So I am sure our audience greatly enjoyed it as well. For those of you who are watching, if you came in late for this talk, don't worry. You can find it both on our Twitch channel and on our YouTube channel shortly. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the Game Design Challenge.
Thank you.